understand that. I'm not the demographic that she's singing to. Uh, so this is not an album I'm going to play again or want to listen to again, but this is definitely an album where, for the first time, there are lyrics in these songs that I can latch onto more than just it's a catchy tune or there's an iconic music video. Like, these are actually songs where there's some decency to them, even though for the most part they're still kind of misses and there's still like a team of writers involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also did not enjoy this album, but I also recognize that it was better than Bangers. I again, you're probably right about this being the best album that we listened to from her, which is not a particularly high bar. I still strongly disliked most of the songs, but there were at least some where I was just like, okay, this isn't torture. A couple more like this, where I'm not like actively hating every second of it, would be nice.
Yeah.
There were a handful of songs that were a little bit more stripped down that didn't rely on, you know, writing to the mean and making sure we had the exact second count and BPM count to, formulate the perfect hit. But
Yep.
here's what really bothered me about the song Flowers. And so I later read about it and finally found this reference to validate myself. I'm like, this sounds melodically a lot like When I Was Your Man by Bruno Mars. And also
Yeah.
then I like the
It's
second time the chorus came around, I'm like, it even sounds like she's like responding directly to Bruno Mars, what he was saying in that song. Which turns out, I guess, to be part of it, but like also different enough that he doesn't have to be a credited writer. But like, listen to, I mean, that was the first time I heard that song. I realized it was
yeah.
a big hit for her, but I don't live in that world. I live
No.
in my own very carefully procured world. So it was the first time I heard it, and all I could think the whole time was like, this feels melodically like I don't live in that world.
Yeah.
Because that's right. It
It is
came out
out today,
literally
the
today.
day we recorded, which is May 24th.
Close enough.
They eventually changed their name to this album title, and
Yeah.
therefore it counts. We followed that up with Sloppy Seconds, which also came out in 1972. So a double dose of the 72s.
That's right.
And then we wrapped things up with Let Me Drink From Your Well, which came out in 1983.
Right.
And I will tell you, Nick, before we get any further, I was relieved a little bit that that album came out in 1983 and not like 2023.
Oh, well, yeah.
Um, not relieved
It wouldn't
enough.
have.
Not, not relieved enough. We'll get into more,
Yeah.
but a little relieved. I'll say that.
Yes.
Now, why don't you talk us through Doctor Hook?
I would love to. So there's a couple interesting things about this record. But first of all, let me just say, you definitely get the vibe listening to it that they don't take themselves too seriously. This is just like a bunch of guys who are buds and who get together and strum some chords and sing some songs and have fun doing it. And
Yeah.
I do think that like comes across nicely. I mean, it means that what they do is sloppy. It means that what they do is a little bit silly, but I don't think that they mean to do anything more than that. So I think that's totally fine. Their identity is pretty clear on this record. And um, what is super interesting for anyone who was a child from the 80s to now
Yeah.
is the fact that these songs are all written by Shel Silverstein. The lyrics, at least, the poet.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, as someone who read those books about 1 trillion times each as a kid, I hear Shell's voice in a lot of the lyrics on this. Like I can very much hear the Shel
100%.
Silverstein-ness of it. And for that, there is some nice nostalgia. Like, oh, like I know somebody who writes just like this, who was a treasured part of my childhood. And what was the other big surprise for me, aside from Shel Silverstein being the one who wrote their music, is also they have one really huge song that has kept on being famous through the decades that we will talk about on the next album. But like they also had an astounding number of like hit singles and chart success throughout the 70s that I had no idea existed, including the song Sylvia's Mother, which actually charted higher than Cover the Rolling Stone.
Spoiler
as a single,
alert,
I know.
man. Come
I know.
on.
Whoops. And also was a million seller. It was their first million selling single. It was like pretty popular. And it's a really sappy song, but it's supposed to be like it's more of a satire on that type of sappy song than it is that itself. So all in all, it's a good debut. It was interesting.
Okay. You got a lot of the positives out of the way. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Shel Silverstein was a revelation on this album. And I will say is dearly missed in other albums that we're going to get to. Because they weren't allowed to talk about other stuff, I guess, when Shel Silverstein was writing. Now, into the, you said uniqueness, interesting qualities. Is what you mean that sometimes there's like almost like a lyrical singing happening and like really nice singing, and then sometimes there's just a dude that sings like this and he's like, hey, my name is this, and I'm oh, that hurt me.
Yeah, it does hurt.
That actually physically hurt me to do.
I was gonna say anyone who knows the song, that the big one that we mentioned, will recognize that there are several different voices that come into play here.
Yeah, it's very strangely done on this album because it's like there's no correlation between the two. And it's like there's no way you actually sound like that. Like
it's a strange way to sound.
Yeah, it's like with us, we both sing on both of our albums, and it would be like if when I sang, I just like sang normally, and you were just like, hello, my name is Nicholas, and this is ridiculous. Like that, and you just put on a weird affectation on your voice for no reason. But it definitely is like a bunch of dudes just goofing around.
Yeah.
This album was decent. It was sloppy. It was clearly just like, thrown together a little bit, but it was decent. So I'll take us into Sloppy Seconds, another album from the same year. So, not a ton of chance for growth here.
Right.
And here's the thing. We're still in the Shel Silverstein world.
We are.
Shel Silverstein still writes all their lyrics, which hurts a little more on this one. Because the first song is called Freakin' at the Freaker's Ball.
Which sounds like it could have been a Shel Silverstein poem in like A Light in the Attic or Where the Sidewalk Ends.
Yes, until you listen to the lyrics. And then you go, this was maybe not, this is maybe shouldn't have been on Where the Sidewalk Ends. For a good reason.
Very fair.
That is a song that I guess, there are certain things where you realize like, we as a culture still have a long way to go. And then there are some things that you're like, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
And that is definitely one of them. There is just some things that get said in that song that like had me clutching my pearls, we'll say.
Sure.
The rest of the stuff, I mean, it's kind of like realistically 70-something minute long album in terms of how similar it all sounds.
Yep.
There's still the weird difference between like, hey, it's me and I'm singing a song, and then there's me, the other guy. Like, it's still strange. The album ends with the cover of Rolling Stone, which is by far their most enduring hit.
Sure. I mean, did you not listen to the version that ended with something slightly different?
Oh, God.
Because I did.
I did. Yes, we both listened to the CD bonus track
Hmm.
at
How
the
could you
end,
not? It's only a minute and a half. You
which
got to see what it's all about.
breaks your heart because it's also written by Shel Silverstein. Like what?
Uh,
Like
yeah,
this album in particular. First off, that song is called "Looking for Pussy." I'm just gonna throw it out there.
that is what it is called.
And guess what the subject matter is?
A missing cat.
No, sadly, it's not.
Well,
You
I've
wish it was.
given everything that I could give in that guess.
It was very weird. Uh I whatever. The bookends of this album had me, like I said earlier, clutching my pearls.
Yeah,
The rest of the album was fine. This is not a band that I like a lot.
sure,
They're just a bunch of dudes having fun. It's a style of music that's just
exactly.
whatever. It's sloppy, which I guess they warned you with the album title.
Right.
The singing is decent at times, and then also like a demented demon at other times. And Shel Silverstein has changed for me because of all of this.
I understand.
And those are my opinions.
Okay. So yeah, I agree. It's mostly just the same album. I will say I think they have honed a little bit better what they do for this record. Like I think if you like went song for song, first album, second album, while mostly sounding the same, second album's a little bit stronger.
Sure.
Especially with, I think "Cover the Rolling Stone" is genuinely a great song.
It is by far the best song we
it
listened to
is-
from them.
It is not only like musically fun and interesting, and like the satire comes through, I feel like really well, both lyrically and in terms of the music.
Yeah.
Like they definitely like do that word painting thing where they're like they create satire with sound, which is pretty cool to do on that song. But there were some things on there that were questionable, as you noted with
Yeah,
the first and the
just a
last song
couple.
particularly. Which I also had some.
There's also a song called "Get My Rocks Off."
That's
Like,
true.
There's some weird ones.
There were some weird ones. There were a lot of weird ones, but they
Yeah.
weren't. I still get the feeling like while I wouldn't re-listen to these records, like if you showed up at a party or something and these seven guys were all just like sitting around with guitars and stuff, jamming and singing, you'd want to sit down and sing along because they seem like they're having fun.
Yeah,
That's
I might bow out if they start playing
Well,
"Looking for Pussy." But
I agree with you there, but I'm talking the vibe of the album.
the vibe of the
Feels
album,
that way.
I'm with you on some of that.
Okay. So now I have to get to Let Me Drink From Your Well, and I need to start with something that has nothing to do with the music.
Good.
Was this available for you to stream?
Yeah, right, dude.
Okay. So did you watch the same video of this album on
Of the
YouTube as
guy-
me of
yeah,
the
just
redneck guy just
yeah.
driving around in his golf cart for 40
Yeah.
minutes?
Of course I did.
Okay, thank goodness. So if anyone ever wants to listen to this album for some reason, just know that the only way to do it is by watching some guy just driving around in his golf cart for 40 minutes.
And I'll tell you what. This may be a spoiler alert.
Okay.
We have in the past really adamantly praised the YouTube community for putting whole albums and stuff like that, especially when they're not available anywhere else. It's a great way to preserve music when like you can't find it anywhere else. It's not streaming. Some of these aren't in print. Like I doubt this is still in print anywhere where
no.
you can buy a copy of it. So like normally I'd say kudos. This one probably could have missed it, bro. I might have
Yeah.
preferred to just watch you mow your lawn or drive your golf cart.
Sure. Okay. So I get into listening to the album,
Uh-huh.
and it's like an 80s version of Dr. Hook musically. In terms of like you still kind of get that same idea. And so I'm listening to the first couple of songs, and I'm not impressed. But I'm listening. I'm not gonna kill this band for this album or anything. And the fourth track happens. And the fourth track is called When You're 18.
Yeah.
And it is basically just like, hey, don't worry. once you're 18, those mean old parents of yours won't have anything to say about whether or not you and I can be together. And when you're finally 18, none of those problems that you're having, they won't. We can take care of all those. You just come to me. And I mean, oh my God, I could not even hear, like, there might have been a rest of the album, but my sole purpose in life became finding out whether or not Shel Silverstein wrote those lyrics because I needed to know whether I should burn all of his books or not.
It was
And the conclusion that I
very
came to was that
important.
he did not.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
did the
thank
same
goodness for
thing.
that.
I did the same thing.
Like, I
I
can't
was
even
like, I
hear
need
what's happening. I just need to find out.
here's what I'm gonna do.
Ugh,
I want to.
okay.
I'll let you finish your review, but I want to just read a small excerpt
Mhm.
of the song. Let our audience know kind of what we're saying here. This is the how the song opens lyrically. You look like a woman and you move like one, but your parents are still telling you that you're too young. That's the first sentence. That's just how immediately how it opens. It is the band Dr. Hook at this point telling a 16 to 17-year-old girl that she looks and moves like a woman.
I feel
Uh
like this just doesn't go, like, it doesn't get better from there. Like, that's a hard opening to bounce back from.
no, it does not get better. I will tell you that. It does not get better. And that is why I said before we started, I was very happy to see that this album came out in 1983 when it's only very, very creepy and disgusting instead
Yeah.
of them being like 75-year-old men saying that.
Yeah.
It's still weird that
Yeah.
they're in their like
Like, I
30s
don't
saying it.
think they could have put that out on an album. Like, somebody along the way would be like, guys, you gotta cut this one.
Yeah,
You
I
can
would I
maybe
would
put that
certainly
out on
hope.
a box set of everything you've ever recorded that comes out after you've died.
I
But
would
like,
hope that
any sooner than that is too soon.
I'm still like I feel like in 1983 someone should have said that.
I agree.
I would have very much liked for that to have been said then.
At any stage along the process, it could have been
Because
said by
here's the thing,
anyone.
Ray Sawyer,
Mhm.
who is the lead vocalist of this band, who is deceased, so rest in peace, I guess, was born in 1937. So in 1983, he was well into his 40s,
46, 40, 45, 46 when I read it.
45 to 46 years old. Guess what you shouldn't be actively singing about? 16 to 17-year-old girls.
Mhm.
I feel like there's a very definitive time when you can sing about them.
Ages 16 to 17.
Yeah, I would even give you 18.
18, sure, yeah, that's fine. I'm not worried.
When you're 19, maybe stop singing about it.
Sure,
And if you
that's
have a
fair.
number that doesn't start with a 1, you're off limits to
Bow
sing
out.
about any of
Bow
that.
out. Time's over.
And if you if you have a number that starts with a 4, please, unless it's 4 years old, in which case you're just a very
That's true.
precocious songwriter, I guess.
Yeah, and well ahead of your time.
Well, yeah, well ahead of your
Well,
time.
all right. I mean, I have nothing else to say about, like, this record was a blur to me after that happened. It took me so far out of the moment that I couldn't think about anything else but that. But the record, I mean, the sound of the music was like, hey, it's this serious, unserious, sloppy silliness, but also 80s-ified was what I remember of that blur
Yeah,
in my
it
life.
was the worst of the 3.
Oh, for sure.
For a multitude of reasons. Lyrically was all around weaker. Shel Silverstein is a poet,
Hmm.
and so was writing strong lyrics. And when he was no longer writing their lyrics, they weren't good. And even the ones that weren't about like grooming, because that's what that song is
Yeah,
about.
it is. And here's what I'll say for the sake of fairness.
Yeah.
Perhaps based on some of their previous songs and the spirit of those poems, that song was intended to be a satire. Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, like,
I
that's
would.
that's the nicest possible thing I can think of to say for fairness sake. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, there were
Listen.
so many songs written like that or in that decade of time that were not. That I mean, but it could have been a play on those things. I don't know.
There is a chance. I will give you that there is a chance that was satirical.
Yeah.
I'll even give you that I hope it was satirical.
I mean, I don't know whether I'm saying it because I believe it or I'm saying it because I'd really like it to be the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am so sorry.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I
this
have
whole album
returned,
was
if you're
just
still
not as
there.
Good.
No.
Like musically, it was worse because you're taking.
Okay, that means you're there. I see the changes. It was like the only time he could talk because he was between work and going home, and I couldn't call him back later because he's got kids now and shit, and he's got dad responsibilities for the rest of the night. And so it was like our only time to talk and catch up on like 10 years worth of shit.
It's all good. Could you
Okay.
hear the podcast?
Yes, and you're now very, very loud.
I'm now loud.
Yeah, you're very loud now.
Weird.
Like-
I've changed nothing.
Yeah, that's strange.
How's that?
Yeah,
Am I better now?
We did the intro, but like basically we tried to do early, and then because I was hoping that James would call like after 6 when the place closed, and then he called immediately. Whatever you do is fine. Yeah, whatever you think makes sense.
All right.
Okay. Are we good to
We just have to restart.
just restart? Okay.
Yeah. Let me just.
All right. At least we didn't get too far.
No. And I just started playing another episode, so
Yeah.
no big deal. All right. You ready?
Come on, delete, you stupid bitch. Okay.
I was playing my favorite relaxation game, Power Wash Simulator.
I love it. Okay. I am now ready though.
All right.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Totem, yeah, it's Totem Talk.
Okay.
Totem
A little
podcast. Totem Talks now. Wow.
Okay. That was very good. I really enjoyed it.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Totem Talks. We are back, and we
And
are
Beautiful.
we're beautiful. Thanks, Nick. I
Yeah,
needed
no
to
problem.
hear that.
I know.
But this is season 8, man. We
You're
are
right.
officially in season 8.
Yeah, I'm excited.
That's
I mean,
honestly
it could go very wrong, but
any
And it will.
opportunity
At
for
some
things
point
to
it
go
will.
wrong. It's the Darwin rule,
I didn't know. Is that
right? Isn't that the Darwin rule?
No,
Anything?
you're
No,
thinking
it's
of,
something. I'm thinking of survival of the
Murphy's
fittest.
Law?
Murphy's Law. That's what it is.
It can go wrong, it will, or anything that can go wrong will.
Yeah, Murphy, Darwin, they're different.
Very
people.
similar.
Similar
Both
but
names,
different.
both surnames, generally, but occasionally first names.
That is true. That is true. Darwin, I think, more than Murphy.
Yeah, but I've heard both of them given as a first name in my life.
Sure. I've heard of Murphy as a last name, but used as a nickname, like Murph.
Sure, yeah, that's true.
But who knows? Honestly, this is all conjecture for
That's true.
what
It
is
wouldn't hold
actually-
up in court at all.
for what's actually an episode of Totem Talks. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Totem Talks, if you have lived under a rock these past 4 years, as we have been just pumping out top tier musical content for
That's
you,
right.
let me open your eyes. Let me shine the light on what we're doing here. Nick and I, the dynamic duo here, the Totem Talks themselves, we're on a journey, an adventure, a mission to find the greatest musical artist of all time. Now, we will leave no stone unturned, no stone unrolled, if you will. We will delve deep into the heart of musical, zeitgeist, into the musical culture of the world. And we're going to find the greatest artist of all time, definitively, with absolutely no room for argument. We will
Yeah.
settle decades of debate as people argue who their favorite is and who the best is.
Yeah, I don't know how anyone could come up with a source more definitive than us. So.
Correct. And honestly, that's about it.
That's right.
If you have missed the first 7 seasons, you will not know who we covered. You can always go find them. They're around.
They are.
they're living
And
somewhere.
They exist. And
Yeah, they exist. You can find them where you find your podcasts. You can also find recordings of us live streaming the podcast, which we do live stream.
how who would have known?
Yeah, every once in a while. You can find that on YouTube, the recordings of them. You can look at the Totem Podcast Network and you'll find us. Or you can find us streaming on Twitch and or YouTube and or Kick. And we will attempt to do that every other Thursday.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll succeed most of the time.
We'll succeed most of the time, but there will always be a random Wednesday or Friday thrown in as
That's right.
schedules dictate.
Yes.
With that all being said, Nick, how are you?
I'm ready to get going.
You're ready to get going. That doesn't sound good or bad.
I am actually doing good, thanks. How are you?
Nick, I'm phenomenal, man.
Excellent.
I'm phenomenal. I'm ready to live. I'm ready to live in the world. Now, before we jump into the episode,
Right.
who are we jumping into? Who are we covering today?
Yeah, be careful about your phrasing there. We are going to start with the Marvelettes today, and then we are going to round things out with the Ronettes. So we're getting all of our ets in today.
A lot of ets. Lot of ets. And you know what? I'm excited about it.
Agreed.
So I think without any further ado, we'll jump into the Marvelettes. So the Marvelettes, as I like to call them, 2 separate words, Marvelettes. But for the sake of the podcast, I'll pronounce it the Marvelettes. The Marvelettes were an American girl group. They were formed in Inkster, Michigan in 1960. Yeah, come on. We're all familiar with Inkster, Michigan. It's a popular place. And it was, the group was consisted of a group of schoolmates. So Gladys Horton, Catherine Anderson, Georgiana Tillman, Juanita Cowart, and Georgina Dobbins.
Excellent.
So that was the initial lineup of the Marvelettes. They were
great group.
Yeah, exactly. They were active 10 years. So 60 to 70, 1960 to 70, to be clear.
Thank you.
We covered 3 albums. We started with their 1961 debut, Please, Mr. Postman. We followed that up with the eponymous album, The Marvelettes, also known as the Pink Album.
What are they, Weezer?
Hey, you know what? They came first. Maybe Weezer's not them.
Yeah.
Ken confirmed Weezer copied the Marvelettes when they did a colored album.
Yeah, wouldn't
any other band or group that is.
Wouldn't that be fascinating if that's who really was?
I would love it.
Impetus behind this.
I would love it. We should talk to them. We should talk to Rivers.
Yeah, next time he's on.
Yeah, good friend of the pod.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, after the Pink Album from 1967, we, after some discussion, I believe made the correct choice to wrap things up with In Full Bloom from 1969.
That's right.
Now, we will discuss a bit of 1970s The Return of the Marvelettes, but when discussing it, I think everyone will understand why we did not include that in our judgment of the Marvelettes here. Oh, man. And listen, the Marvelettes are my group, so I'm going to get us started with Please, Mr. Postman. And here's the thing. 1961, this is just the epitome of Motown pop. That is like so obvious.
In its earliest iteration.
Exactly. The beginning of Motown pop, where you're just out of that like 50s doo-wop range, but you're still kind of dipping your toes in it.
Mhm.
Vocal group, that it's all the recipe is there. And here's the thing, listening to it with a 2025 ear, the recipe is there in full and I can hear it, but I have to remember and we have to put ourselves in the place of the fact that they're just baking it right there. Like that
Sure.
is
Mhm.
that is new
Yeah,
stuff to them.
61 is very early on.
Yeah, very early on in the Motown world, and in fact, we'll talk a little bit more about that. The songs themselves, all good, all good stuff. I do think the hit is the hit for a reason. Please, Mr. Postman is the best song on this album.
Mhm.
I do think this album, as we'll see a repeating theme here, becomes a bit repetitious as you listen through it. However, it's not really a problem because the whole album is like maybe 32 minutes long.
Yeah, they're pretty short.
They're pretty short albums, pretty short songs. They do get a little bit repetitive, but the talent is definitely there. It's a talented vocal group. They sound good together. Overall, for the first album, enjoyable. Definitely the title track was the big hit, and
Yeah.
for good reason.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to just touch on two things that you didn't mention there that were very interesting to me. So one thing that I wanted to watch, because first it was something I noticed while listening, and then it was something that I picked up on fully by looking at the track listing. You have two lead singers and the rest of the singers working as backing vocalists here, right?
Yeah.
So on the first side, basically Wanda Young lead sings every single song other than Please Mr. Postman, and she only has one song on the B side, and it's Gladys Horton who does Please Mr. Postman and then everything on the B side. So I'm like, okay, it's very interesting. Clearly, they are thinking of Wanda Young as their like a number one singer because she gets most of the A side songs. And then it turns out the only one that she doesn't sing becomes their big hit.
Yes,
And that
is correct.
will play out in my next observation when we talk about their second album. But I wanted to set the stage there. And then the only other thing that I thought was very, very interesting that you didn't mention, but just like from like a musicology standpoint, the song I think it was All the Love That I've Got had what I must assume was like very, very early synth technology on on the solo section, which
Yeah.
was just like very interesting to hear what it sounded like and how it was implemented as probably one of the first synthesizers recorded. It's got to be in
It's
popular
gotta be
music, at least.
pretty early. I mean, 61 is pretty early. One more thing I wanted to mention that I forgot, which is gonna be this is gonna be a running issue that we have this whole episode, so let's get out of the way. These are both Motown style groups in the 60s. They weren't writing songs.
Right.
This is Motown. This is Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy brings in a team of writers who write their songs for them. That's how it works.
Yeah.
With one exception. Georgia Dobbins is credited as a writer for Please Mr. Postman, which is the group's biggest hit.
Yeah, which that's important.
Yeah, she's not the only credited writer. She's one of 5.
Mhm.
So I can't dictate the degree with which she contributed to the song, but it is interesting because I wasn't expecting to see their names anywhere, especially on the first album.
Yeah.
Something of note.
Definitely. So we'll move on to the Marvelettes, the Pink album. And so the main thing I was looking for was to see like how was the vocal arrangement of the tracks going to go? Were they going to switch things up because maybe they found that their hits were being made by a different lead singer? And really, at the end of the day, the answer is a little, but not really. So they did mix up a little bit more on each side of the record who was singing lead. So you get 2 Gladys Horton songs on the A side this time and 3.5 on the B side. So like it's a little bit more equitable. I wasn't sure if that was something that the band, a lot of these groups are probably not making some of those decisions about where the tracks are going, and So I was curious how the studio felt, and it seems like they just kind of were like, we'll do something, a little something about this, but not that much. As for the album itself, there's a huge difference in the fact that it's 1967. And so 6 years of music passing, I think you get like, it's very rock and roll to start. Like the energy on Barefootin', awesome. Like very early rock and roll type music. Um, and so this album, I think it captures like 1964
They're
a
a little
lot
behind the
better.
time,
You know
right?
what I mean? They're a little
Yeah.
behind the times here, but they've moved in the right direction. And overall, like it's an album that is maybe now buying into a few more formulas than the original album was buying into, which at least helps it vary itself a little bit more. And so I thought, like, even without the strength of a Please Mr. Postman big hit type song on this, that it was overall probably a little bit more soulful and a little better overall than their first.
Yeah, sure. I get what you're saying. This album is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I think for the most part it was still enjoyable. It also does still suffer from being a bit repetitious, as is going to be a running theme
Yeah, I
on
mean,
this.
that's
Not something to really talk about too much. On this album, though, one of the things that I noticed was not only are they not credited as any writers on this album, but they also have less songs kind of written for them here and
yeah,
are
at
instead there's
covers
a
and
handful
yeah.
of covers of songs.
Hmm.
So it's a mix of covers and then also songs written for them.
Yeah.
Which whatever. It is what it is, but it's something to
Again,
note, like
probably not something in their control as much.
sure, and I don't think it is at all, but it's something to mention. I think I think looking at them, the big name of people they covered was Dionne Warwick, probably
Sure.
would be the big name.
I would agree.
So a Message to Michael is a Dionne Warwick cover, which again, not written by Dionne Warwick, was written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David, but it is what it is. I think mostly enjoyable, probably a little dated, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, but
Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
we're gonna run into that this whole episode.
Yeah. I have similar notes coming up, believe it or not.
Yeah. So it is what it is. Still an enjoyable listen and still a talented group.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, still a talented
sure.
group. I don't wanna sell them short on that. It's a little tough. Again, I already kind of said this, but it's a little tough to listen to full album like this through 20-25 years and really try to put yourself in the decade that it came
Yeah.
out.
It's strange because as a person who almost exclusively listens to albums when I listen to music, this genre, like I would rather like I could listen to a 10-hour long playlist of hit pop Motown style songs
Yeah.
from the first half of the 1960s and like really enjoy it the whole time. But when it's just like one album of the same artist and a lot of them are like not quite up to that hit, uh
Yeah.
it does get a lot older for these particular records.
It's a narrower genre
Yeah,
than I think a lot of people quite understand.
sure.
Like when you look at a genre like Motown, it
Over
just
the
invokes a
years, I mean,
sound. Yeah.
yeah. Like, there's so many great artists and albums and things that come out, like, by the time you get into the 60s and 70s, like, all the way through, but that, like, classic pop Motown vocal group with the band behind them, it's like,
Yeah,
if you're not hearing all the hits all the time, it runs thin.
for sure. And I think we're both in agreement on that. So now I'll take us into In Full Bloom. In Full Bloom, 1969. So not much later than the Pink album. And I think a lot of the same things are happening here. You're getting a talented group of women singing these songs. It's a a mix of covers and songs written for them, not seeing any moments of them
Mhm.
contributing here. So, ironically, the only song that we came across where one of the members of the Marvelettes was a credited writer was their biggest hit, Please Mr. Postman,
Right.
which is interesting.
That once in a while something like that does happen.
Yeah, it's very interesting to think about. This one was there. I don't know what else to say. It was fine. They sound good, but at this point, I'm a little fatigued on the Marvelettes just because
Yeah.
all 3 albums, with the exception of the second one having a little more rock influence, as you
Mhm.
mentioned,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sameness here. And again, I don't think it's their fault. And if anybody is familiar with Berry Gordy and the Motown industry, none of it
Lovely
was
guy.
their control, and they probably didn't get paid for any of this either.
Almost
So,
definitely.
that is what it is.
Yeah.
Which it absolutely sucks. And
Great songwriter, but pretty scummy guy.
yeah, well,
Well,
I'm pretty sure in my little glance on your group, we're gonna get a pretty great songwriter
Yeah.
guy as well.
Yeah, who is
Pretty
also
sure I
not
saw a
wonderful
name.
as a human.
Yeah,
Well,
pretty sure I saw a
I'm
name.
pretty sure if you know anything about the Ronettes and what Ronnie's last name was for a time, you'll know
I
who
know.
we're talking about. But here's the like I had some very similar thoughts. Most of it was just like pleasantly forgettable. There were moments where I thought like, "Hey, it's 1969," and it sounds like how can I say? Maybe they haven't like it's been 3 or 4 years, and they haven't heard it themselves yet. But like somebody told the Marvelettes about like Rubber Soul and like that era of music that things were progressing through in the mid '60s, and they were like if you got the idea, if you could only hear what Rubber Soul sounded like, you could maybe try to like throw that level of creativity and songwriting influence into this album too. And so it sounds like maybe the producer of the record had like maybe listened to it before and like tried to implement some things on a few songs that were interesting. But also like what I'm trying to say is it's perpetually like they sort of heard about something that happened 3 years ago and now they're getting around to it. Is
Yeah,
the whole latter half of the career of the Marvelettes.
sure.
It was like and honestly I think it's part of it is because it's one of these like constructed bands, one of these groups, not that they didn't like sing together or work together on their own before that, but once they were under Berry Gordy's control and their songs were being picked for them and it was being recorded in a certain way that they probably had very little control over. I feel like groups like that tend to change the slowest.
Yes, and this what I want to be clear. Just I do agree with you that this feels constructed. They were a group before Motown, so they all met
Yes.
in high school together, formed a group. They were in the Glee Club in high school, formed a vocal group
Right,
with
which is
everyone,
why
I
I
believe,
very
except
much
for
meant, like,
Wanda
when they
Rogers.
signed and became under the creative control of Berry Gordy,
Correct.
not who they were originally or anything
Yep.
like that.
Yeah, so I think we're both in agreement here, and I think the only thing left is to spill some facts about the Marvelettes. So I'll start with the unique thing, which is a pretty darn cool unique thing. So the Miracles, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, were arguably the first successful Motown group.
We may hear about them again this season.
We may hear about them one day. Now, other than the Miracles, the first successful Motown group, and therefore the first successful female vocal Motown group, were the Marvelettes.
Yeah.
The 1961 hit "Please Mr. Postman" was one of the first #1 singles recorded by an all-female vocal group and the first by a Motown recording act. Not only is that unique,
Yeah,
but it's
that's really cool.
untouchably unique. No one will ever
Be the first Motown
be the
number
first
one again.
Motown group
Yeah.
again to do this. So
Yeah.
congratulations to the Marvelettes. That's a huge accomplishment.
Totally.
It leads us right into their highlight, which is, of course, it's that. I mean, it's "Please Mr.
Yeah.
Postman." It's having the first Motown #1 hit by a female vocal group.
Yeah, that's pretty huge.
It's absolutely enormous. So, and in a time where, women were severely underappreciated musically, the 60s, I mean, I think it was a huge accomplishment.
Totally.
So, they were the first Motown act to have a chart topper on the Hot 100.
Yeah,
and that's sans gender, just
right.
in
Yeah,
general.
generally, right.
All right, some low lights. And here's where we're going to go. So I don't have any meanest or nicest things because we normally talk about them. I don't really have them. I couldn't really find too much about charity initiatives. So I'm going to talk just a bit about the truth of this group.
Yeah,
'cause
I did
there's some
something
issues
similar
here.
if it makes you feel better.
Sure, it does. So the first thing was in 1967. Gladys Horton, who we discussed as one of the two lead singers of this group, reconsidered her involvement with the Marvelettes. Her first child, Sammy, was born with cerebral palsy, and then Horton decided to leave the group. So that kind of happened at that point. It didn't seem to be any type of like malcontentness on her part. It just an unfortunate circumstance for her. She to spend time with her family and things like that left the group. Now Wanda Rogers, however, has a bit of a pedigree to her. So she was suffering from a number of personal problems. That's all that I can find out.
Okay.
I don't know if that is like drugs or
Sure.
what. She was extremely unreliable to work with, including it was almost impossible to schedule live events because she, like, a lot of the time just wouldn't show up to them,
I've
which
heard
is
that. That's-
unfortunate.
yeah, that is the thing that happens to certain musicians sometimes.
Yeah. But here's the thing that blows my mind. We both talked about Berry Gordy not being maybe the greatest person.
Right.
But I've always thought of him as a pretty savvy businessman.
Yeah, I would agree. If
Right.
stealing from your employees is what makes one a savvy businessman, and in America, it certainly does.
Yeah, look, I absolutely do not think
You should
that-
run for president.
Well,
What is there bad news on that
he's
front?
the right age. Anyway, in 1970, Wanda Rogers recorded a solo album, and it was supposed to be like the end of the Marvelettes, and here comes Wanda Rogers.
Okay.
However, a combination of Wanda Rogers not having like a recognizable name in the industry,
right.
and also her being extremely unreliable, led to them naming that album The Return of the Marvelettes. No original member of the Marvelettes was on it. No original member of the Marvelettes had anything to do with it, but they wanted to put them on the cover and market it as a Marvelettes album with Wanda Young as the lead singer, kind of piggybacking her. It's a concept in television we call a backdoor pilot.
Yeah, right.
Which, if you're not familiar with what a backdoor pilot is, it's when
It's
you are
farm
watching a show.
episode of The Office.
Yeah, yeah, you're watching a show, and one episode of the show really heavily features another character, and then like a year later, that character has their own spin-off show. That was a backdoor pilot you saw.
Right.
And that's what they tried to do here. The album was a modest hit, but Catherine Anderson in particular refused to participate at all and refused to appear on the cover. Some of the other members of the Marvelettes like graced the cover of the album,
But despite not being a part of it.
despite not being featured at all. Just whatever. I guess,
Sure.
It was a modest hit, as I mentioned. The group disbanded. Catherine Anderson, ironically, after the argument of her not being there, stayed on as a staff writer for Motown for a few years.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah, but that was kind of the end of the Marvelettes.
Yeah.
But I always thought that when I did my research, I thought it was really interesting because this is a woman who has been unreliable, has missed performances, and all this stuff. And you were like, "Cool, let's bet the horse on her. Let's bet the Marvelettes horse on her."
Sure. Yeah.
An interesting
it's
tactic,
right.
for sure. And then finishing up some of the low light situation before we do a bit of a talk
Yeah.
about some stuff. Most of the members of this group are now deceased. That is also a big low light. So Georgina Dobbins died of a heart attack in 2020. Wanda Rogers died of COPD in 2021. Catherine Anderson died of heart failure in 2023. As of right now, Juanita Cowart, now Juanita Cowart Motley, is the only surviving member of the group.
Okay. Good
So that's what I've got for that. Now, in 1980, Georgiana Tillman died of complications of lupus at 36.
Jeez.
So big low light there.
Yeah.
Very sad. So after Georgiana passed away, several former members of the Marvelettes filed a lawsuit against Motown Records, complaining that they didn't receive any royalties for their work.
And they didn't want Georgiana to be a part of that lawsuit.
I don't know. I guess maybe her death kind of woke them up to the fact that like life is fleeting and we should get paid for what we did. So, I don't see any resolution to that suit except for the fact that it happened. And then in 1989, Gladys Horton tried to reunite the Marvelettes after being offered a contract with Motor City Records. The only other Marvelette who agreed was Wanda Young.
Of course.
So that happened.
Who else?
Yeah.
I mean, those are your two lead singers, right? So.
Yeah. Following this, Gladys Horton did continue to perform, sometimes as Gladys Horton of the Marvelettes. But then due to a legal disagreement with this man named Larry Marshak, who bought the name The Marvelettes from Motown.
Always.
And after the label lost the rights, he bought it and he just hired groups of women to be the Marvelettes, similar to the Zombies.
Yeah.
Just multiple Marvelettes traipsing around America, singing Marvelette songs.
Yeah, this is basically what happened to almost every Motown group, though, right? I mean, that's basically what the Drifters and a bunch of other things that are still going on now are.
Yet again,
somebody owns the name and just sends random people out.
Yeah, just have to highlight how absolutely ridiculous it is.
Yeah, like and to be clear to the musicians in that, like all I'm sure very talented singers who just really wanted work and were willing to take the best case, like not on them at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so, just going on here, 33 states had legislation launched via the Truth in Music Act to prevent performers from using the name of a group that didn't have at least one original member in them.
Okay.
Which forced Marshak to change the names of the group, the multiple groups that he hired as the Marvelettes, to tribute to the Marvelettes.
Okay.
Which was good.
Yeah.
However, Catherine Anderson and Gladys Horton both spent the rest of their lives fighting to have the name the Marvelettes returned to them. Never did.
Of course.
Gladys Horton passed away in 2011 of a stroke, and that was it. So they fought to try to get the name the Marvelettes back. Were unable to do so through legislation.
Of course.
And just another tale of a lot of the very, very popular and talented musicians in the Motown era being absolutely taken advantage of.
Yes.
And you hate to see it.
You do. And we will see more of it because it's time to move on to the Ronettes.
Well, I have one more thing.
Wait, you have another thing? Okay.
I have my 6 degrees of Totem Talks.
Oh, you do that last.
I do that last.
It seemed like you were coming to a place of wrapping things up.
I was coming to a place where I wrap things up with my 6 degrees of Totem Talks,
which I suppose
this was a relatively easy one. Now, I did struggle, and by struggle I mean I was torn between two, because I could have very easily talked about, if I can find their names, Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil.
Oh, well, sure.
Neil,
they've written everything.
Who wrote a song for their third album. But I decided to just say, screw it. Why don't we talk about one of the other popular covers of Please Mr. Postman, which was done by the Carpenters?
Oh, that was not at all where I thought you were going.
I know.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm not wrong. The Carpenters did a popular cover of that song.
But there's one other cover that I mean, there's a cover that, to me, because of who it is.
I know. It was also covered by the Beatles, Nick.
Yeah.
I was That was all set up in a way to make Nick think I was going to talk about the
The
Beatles.
Beatles.
But yeah, so really at 12 Degrees of Totem Talks, Beatles and Carpenters both covered Please Mr.
Excellent.
Postman. And that's all I got.
And now we'll get back to the trauma and take on the Ronettes.
Does it shock you to learn that Berry Gordy took advantage of the Muggleheads?
No.
You know, I didn't think it would, Nick. I didn't think it would.
Had they been paid and like said nothing but nice things about their time at Motown, that would have shocked me.
Yeah, that would have been the surprising part for sure. All right. I'm ready to just hit it quick.
Okay.
Right.
3, 2.
The Ronettes were an American girl group from Washington Heights, Manhattan, New York City. So lights up on Washington Heights, huh?
That's right. I know. What that
The group
means.
consisted of lead singer Veronica Bennett, who that's her only name that I'm going to call her.
Yeah,
we can discuss her other name as we discuss
Sure.
other people. Her older sister, Estelle Bennett, and their cousin, Nedra Talley.
That's
You
right.
don't hear of many Nedras.
No,
anymore.
not nearly enough.
But, you know, not you want to bring back the name Nedra?
I
Should we?
have no means of doing that. So unfortunately,
We just start
again,
calling random people Nedra till it sticks.
I'm in.
Now, back to the Ronettes. The Ronettes were popular from 1959 to 1967, and then again from 1973 to 1974. Just real quick, in, out, done.
Yeah, very quick.
So we covered every single official album release by the Ronettes, which was just the one presenting the Fabulous Ronettes,
That's right.
which came out in 1964. This is a group that was probably more into singles.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You know, we'll talk about. But
Yes. And I guess I'll start with this discussion of this record by talking about the singles, or at least two of them. The very first track, which was the third single released, is Walking in the Rain, which I think is the second highest charting Ronette single of all time. And it's really cool, like genuine, like the effects that they use to get the sound of the thunder and rain throughout the song, especially for that time. It sounds really cool. It's really interesting. It's sticking point for that song. And then the other, pretty big single off this, of course, their highest charting single of all time, and what is largely considered to be one of the greatest pop songs of all time is Be My Baby is on here, of course.
Yeah.
And that is one of those songs that I struggle to listen to at less than full volume. I don't know, but like I hear that
No,
come
I
on
get
and
it.
I'm like, I'm gonna crank that up.
Yeah.
That's fun. But there was other stuff on here that I wasn't expecting as much. And what was really cool is, and I'll kind of talk about where the roots of this come from. They actually have a Ray Charles cover on here of What Did I Say, which is originally a great song. But this is also the live version that the Ronettes do is also really good and enjoyable. I mean, it's also very different from some of the other, like Be My Baby is great and Walking in the Rain is great, but they're different. They're different types of songs than What Did I Say.
Couldn't agree more.
And to hear them, like they were so confident in performing this one live, and it sounds so good live that they actually added it in as a live cut on this record. I think that says a lot about who they were also behind the scenes when they were picking what music they wanted to sing when they performed. I mean, the one obvious and major drawback to this record is that they don't write any of the music. They just don't.
They just don't.
They just don't.
It's the time.
Yeah. So I mean, other than that, I enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree with you. It was an enjoyable record, with a bit more variety than I was expecting in terms of,
Right.
the difference of the songs. But at the same time, it's a quick in and out record. You're in the 30-minute range. You're under 40 minutes. I'm not exactly sure where in the 30s it's ranked, but you're under 40 minutes,
36 and a half.
36 and a half. So it's good. It's good. It's quick, and they don't write it. So it's unfortunate. Both of these artists, they're suffering a bit in our formula, but
Yeah.
it's to be expected.
Yeah, it's
We
just
knew it was going to happen.
going into the very first episode, we knew things like this would happen. So
Yeah, but I think for the most part, it was enjoyable, and I don't really have too much to say because it's honestly a lot of the times when we cover artists and we put artists together like this,
Mhm.
I feel like we can find a lot of difference.
Sure.
And I feel like this is maybe the first time where both of these groups are just so freaking similar.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
style of music, the talent level that they both are coming at it
Mhm.
with, like,
The
we're gonna come
backstory
down
and
to a
the loss
couple.
of control of
Yeah,
what they were doing on their own, and yeah,
it's pretty crazy to think about.
yeah,
You know,
for sure.
both suffering, under the thumb of just real peachy keen men,
That's
just
right.
are real stand-up citizens.
Yeah,
One of them definitely didn't die in prison,
right. For
for
sure.
sure. Definitely didn't.
No, we'll never discuss it again. All right, I guess I'll just talk about them because that was their only album.
Yes, it
So,
was.
so I'm going to start with the 6 Degrees actually because that's going to help me get into some other things. And it takes place in the year 1964, the same year that their one record came out. When the Ronettes met Jimi Hendrix at a club called Odine's. Um, this was a little bit before their like really huge, and obviously "Be My Baby" comes out on their 64 record. Um, and so they're playing with him, and they would end up like singing background, and go. Ronnie would go up and sing with him, and they also kind of reconnected later on in 1969 after the Ronettes kind of peaked and flamed out again. And they did backing vocals on a song called Earth Blues, which was on a posthumous Jimi Hendrix record. So they are credited on the album Rainbow Bridge.
Okay.
Um, so they have that Jimmy connection. But also, fun fact about the song "Be My Baby." Do you know that that song is the first time in history where the voice of a young Cher was recorded?
No.
Yeah, she does. She is in on the backing vocals on that official recording.
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Okay.
And we did cover Sonny and Cher,
We did.
so I had to throw that in there. But okay, so also talking about Hendrix and those clubs that were around at the time, where people were Jimi Hendrix was also in another band that Joe Pesci was in at one point, Joey D and the Starlighters. And Joey D and the Starlighters obviously were like the act that played at the Peppermint Lounge. That's what they're the house band at the Peppermint Lounge. And the Ronettes actually got their start there by a mistake. So this is what's I put as unique about them. So they were going there thinking they were hired to be a singing group, to be like one of the performers along with Joey D and the Starlighters. And the venue, for whatever reason, thought they were a dance act who were like booked to be backup dancers behind the bands. And so they were like, all right, well, we're here. I guess we'll dance behind Joey D. Um, and actually, Ronnie and Nedra both had to disguise themselves, so to speak, to get into the club because they weren't old enough to even go in.
Good.
And it was actually during that Ronnie first started singing the backing vocals when the band was covering "What Did I Say?" And so she was singing along with the band doing that as originally only just a backup dancer, even though they thought they were going there to sing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of their way in. And all those live performances of "What Did I Say?" became kind of a staple of what they did and got onto their record. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, Yeah, I knew it was all going to tie back together.
It did.
The highlight, I think, is obvious. It's got to be My Baby. It's a song in the
Yeah.
Grammy Hall of Fame. It was ranked number 22 on Rolling Stone's list of the top 500 songs. The production of that song that Phil Spector did was described by Rolling Stone as, quote, the Rosetta Stone for studio pioneers like the Beatles and Brian Wilson. So,
Yeah.
like, it's not only important as just a pop song that was extremely popular and influential as a song, but also in terms of the recording style. Like, obviously, Phil Spector is well known for his wall of sound.
Oh, you said it.
Yeah, I said it. So it was important as a studio recording as well as a song in and of itself. Now, the lowlights and means and nicest are all going to sort of tie together in this milieu of Phil Spector and the Ronettes interactions throughout
Sure.
time. So their low light is, I just said it was Phil Spector. So essentially, one of the reasons why there's so much difficulty with the music here, like obviously they recorded other singles and things outside of this one studio album, but they also recorded a lot more that Spector would just like refuse to release a bunch of the songs. Like he was afraid of maybe losing his grip on Ronnie if she got,
Too big.
too famous or big. So like he wanted to hold her back so that he could hold on to her and kind of hold her down. So like they would record really good versions of songs, and then a few months later, other groups were putting out their version of the song, and I was just like, all right, well, we missed our chance on this one. Like, what are we doing? Like the girls all really wanted them to come out, and Spector was just not allowing it. And this is also like one of the things that's kind of credited for, the Ronettes kind of stormed onto the scene and weren't super popular with that record and with Be My Baby and a couple other singles. And they were one of the bands that seemed like they were maybe going to stick around even through the British invasion. But they ended up just like totally getting usurped by the Supremes because the Supremes kept putting out songs.
Yeah.
And Phil Spector was just not allowing the Ronettes to do anymore.
What a guy.
Yeah, totally. And so that like kind of blends in with me in the way that all the non-Ronnie Spector members of the group were treated. They essentially like they knew obviously that Ronnie was treated in a certain way and everyone else was kind of an afterthought. And then like I guess it all sort of culminates. They were on a bill with the Beatles in '66 for a 14-date tour across America. And Ronnie obviously wanted to be a part of that tour with the group. And Phil Spector got so upset that she wanted to go on tour that he forced Ronnie to remain in California. And like one of their cousins filled in for her on the tour, and Nedra and Estelle would do the lead vocals live. Basically, it was to the point where it seemed like maybe Ronnie was like just kind of trapped in her house with Phil Spector, who like wouldn't let her leave, and she was kind of like being held prisoner there against her will for a time.
Oh God.
So he was a total psycho.
Yeah, it's always just a normal day when you find another just horrific thing that Phil Spector did.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's like, cool, man. This is why it's so important. I'm telling you right now. And truly take my advice. Anybody who listens to this, you can like something.
That's true.
You can like something. You can like a piece of art. You can like a book. You can like a movie. You can like a song. Don't ever equate your liking of something with the person who created it, because they all suck.
Well, a lot of them.
A lot of them suck. And
we've covered tons of artists who are very wonderful people. And
sure.
People.
Yeah. I'm saying like a song for itself, like a movie for itself, like a book for itself. And if the creator of it also happens to be a good person, you can like them for themselves as well.
Yeah.
But
Don't count on
A
it.
hard lesson I had to learn throughout this podcast was like, don't, they say don't meet your heroes, and that it's so true. Like, don't expect the people who create good things to be good people, because
Sure.
the vast majority of them are human beings. Like,
Yeah.
who are both good and bad, but
Who
there are a
are
subsection of them like Phil
psychos and
Spector who are
murderers.
just bad.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
that's my
speaking of
little
which-
PSA. I always run into it, as
Yeah.
a millennial, I was a fan
Right.
of Harry Potter,
Yes.
and I run into it all the time with
That
J.K.
makes a
Rowling
lot of
being a
sense.
monster. And it's like, yes, J.K. Rowling is a monster. I hate the woman. I hate everything she stands for. She also wrote a good book series. Like,
I mean, we
both
should
things are
should
true.
have known when the slavery of an entire species was like treated with such negligence throughout the series that maybe she didn't care that much about other people. But anyway,
Listen, I
anyone
do
who
not
cared
get me
about it was
started on
seen
my
as a complete
dissertation.
idiot.
Do not get me started on my dissertation on the bullshit of J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
Like, why were there no gay people? Why were there no?
Well, if there
Why were
were,
there no
what names
non-villainous
would they
fat
have
people?
had? Like, can you think of what would J.K. Rowling like? Like,
Oh yeah, I'm saying
like this. Oh, look, it's our new mate, Dick homosexual. He's like that's
yeah.
the level
Listen,
of
I get it. I'm just
level of
saying,
naming
like,
that she was.
it sucks when people that you like become monsters.
Yeah.
So don't like them. Just like their stuff.
Well, look, I have good news because I'm going to wrap things up with the nice part, which is that they do eventually sort of get some revenge on Phil Spector. They did win a lawsuit and won $2.6 million for unpaid royalties. So they did end up squeezing some of the money that they deserved out of him. And also in 2007, after decades of Phil Spector using his power in the industry to block the Ronettes from ever being considered for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, for some reason after 2007, he was not able to block it anymore.
I wonder why.
I don't know if it had anything to do with the fact that he was awaiting trial for murder.
Yes, and was convicted of second-degree murder. And I'll tell you what, man. So like, I just perused a little bit of Ronnie Spector's personal life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I can't. My brain cannot remember if you said all of the stuff about how Phil. Like, you mentioned that allegedly Phil Spector kept her captive.
Yes.
Did you talk about the fact that the way he kept her captive was by surrounding their house with barbed wire and guard dogs? And
No,
he confiscated all of her shoes to prevent her from leaving. And when she was allowed out of the house, she had to travel with a life-size dummy of Phil Spector in the car with her. And she stated that Phil Spector installed a gold coffin with a glass top in his basement and promised that if she ever left him, he would kill her and display her in it.
I don't mean to laugh, but I don't know what else to do when faced with such insane information. Like how did that guy not go to jail until like just kind of recently in the grand scheme of things?
Apparently it got so bad. I'm reading this now. It got so bad
like
that Ronnie Spector became an alcoholic solely for the purpose of going to AA meetings to leave the house.
What was that guy's name at the World Fair in Chicago or whatever, who like built the house of traps that became the inspiration for a bunch of like slasher movies and shit afterwards, because he was just like the craziest serial killer who would just like abduct people and put them at H.H. Holmes or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? And he just had like a house full of booby. Like Phil Spector like almost definitely killed like 20 people.
I mean, he's the craziest thing.
Like
literally, I'm reading
not what a person who is even sniffing stable does.
I'm just continuing to read this, and it just gets worse and worse. In 1972, the way she got out of it was by fleeing the mansion barefoot with nothing but the clothes on her back with her mother's help, because she didn't want to die there. She forfeited all future recording earnings to Phil Spector in their divorce agreement, alleging that Phil Spector threatened to have a hitman come kill her. And that's why
I believe
Like,
everything that she says.
She testified that Phil had frequently pulled a gun on her during their marriage and threatened to kill her unless she surrendered custody of their children.
How did he not spend all of his life in jail?
I hope. Listen,
Like, I'm not in favor of putting babies in prison, but maybe we should have just put Phil in there right from the start. Like,
I'm
I don't know
telling
that
you,
this guy should have ever breathed a free breath.
I'm telling you, man, what a fucking
Danger to
monster!
society.
What a
Oof.
monster! That is awful.
Yeah, that's rough.
Like, it's crazy to me. Whatever. Regardless, this is not a Phil Spector episode, and I want to give him no more screen time because the Ronettes deserve it.
Agreed.
But power to every member of that group, especially Ronnie Spector, for having to put up with that and living through it and coming out the other side. Because holy crap, is that just brutal to read?
That is brutal. Okay, well, let's grade him, I guess.
Let's grade him.
All right, we'll start with the Marvelettes. And look, they start with at least one hit. They start with some, I assume the vocal group Hall of Fame and things like that.
Yeah, so I do have a couple things. So there is more than one. Please, Mr. Postman's their big hit.
Sure, yeah.
They did have a couple, 2 or 3 other minor hits, which I think total another hit in their in totality. In 2004, they were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. They were nominated in 2013 for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And in 2013, they were inducted into the R&B Hall of Fame, the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. So those are some things. They also won the Rhythm and Blues Pioneer Award from the Rhythm and Blues Foundation.
Nice.
In 1995. So a number of little accolades for them.
What do they add up to?
I mean, I think realistically, here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the average person who knows the song "Please, Mr. Postman" maybe doesn't know the name, the Marvelettes.
I would say, of the two that are competing tonight, I think there's one that whose name has a little bit more staying power.
That is correct, but I do think that the scores themselves may end up being similar for this because the hits of the Marvelettes are more numerous than the hits for the Ronettes. So I think you take the name, mix it around. I think maybe we're looking at similar scores here, and I think we're looking in like I could go as high as a 3.
For who? The Marvelettes? The Ronettes have to have it because they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's their
right. But so see, here's the thing: we're talking about a 4 floor for the Ronettes. Then I think the Marvelettes
they are in all the other Hall of Fames, and
they're in all the other Hall of Fames,
the Grammy Hall of Fame, and
which I want to be so clear. I do think calling it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a problem when you induct groups like the Ronettes and nominate the Marvelettes.
It should just be the Music
Hall of Fame.
That would solve everything. I have no problem with problem from every single genre being included. Just call it music.
Yeah, or just have a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that's for rock and roll.
Like,
and
I totally
Music Hall of Fame for everything.
Like, borderline acts that tiptoe around genres and stuff, but like, just I don't know, just call it music.
Either way, I think maybe I reading the list of things they're in as well, the Hall of Fames, I'm gonna go with a 3.5.
Okay, so 3 to 3.5 here.
Yeah.
Okay. Breadth of work. This one is going to give the Marvelettes a little bit more because they're starting at a 2.5 for their 3 albums. In terms of sales, Please, Mr. Postman, I'm sure was at least gold, so they've got at least $500,000 there.
Please, Mr. Postman, and also Don't Mess with Bill are both certified gold.
Okay.
Which means they don't lose any score.
Okay. So I think that's probably it. Yeah.
And now do we want to add or subtract anything?
Well, they're your group, so I'll let you make the first call.
Yeah, I'm going to add 0.2. I think they're pleasant to listen to. I think they get a bit repetitive, but the talent is there, and they're about to start suffering big time.
Yeah.
So I want to be positive here.
That's totally fair.
It was a pleasant listen all the way through.
And I'll give them a 0.1 for similar reasons. So it's 2.8 for them. The Ronettes. Now here is what's tricky. They have one studio album.
Yeah.
But they did record, like I said, so many singles and different things, and they just weren't putting albums out for whatever reason, or they have singles blocked for a time and then released later.
Yeah.
All in all, they have officially recorded 57 songs. So in the world, there are 57 Ronettes songs. So I do think it would probably be unfair to them as a group because they certainly weren't making the decision about, and like compilations of singles that were not on the first album were later released um, as their own compilation albums. But I don't think it would be fair to score them one album here. I think it would be fairer to score them at least 2 or 3.
Okay, well, wait, hold on. Hold on. I think we might have messed up the Marvelettes then,
Oh, okay.
because the Marvelettes have more than 3 albums, which we started them at 3 albums.
Oh,
We just covered
I
3
was,
there.
yeah, you're right.
And I went right with you. My
You
brain
did.
was
Yeah, I wasn't looking at their discography page. I was just like, oh, 3 and 1. That's right.
Yeah, we're just talking
But
about
no,
them.
good point.
Yeah, the Marvelettes have
yeah.
significantly more
Glad that
than
we're
3
figuring that
albums.
out.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay. So really they have a 5.8 here instead of a 2.8.
Yeah.
All right, good catch. Now we can officially do the Ronettes, which again, like I'm saying, I think they need to be scored for at least 2 or 3 albums with 57 songs.
Yeah, I'm willing to give them credit for like a 2.5 album
Okay.
birth. I know 57 would be more than that. I understand.
It puts them at about a 3 to start instead of a
I
like
I
0.8,
understand that
which
Phil
is way
Spector
more
is the
accurate.
reason for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And the holding back and his need for control and all that nonsense. But it doesn't, it unfortunately now is too late, I think, to like, we can't, like, if I could go back and retroactively release them all on time, I would.
Sure.
But
And like I said, there were other compilation albums of
Yeah.
earlier singles not included that on their one album that were released. So there are other albums of Ronette's work that technically exist
yeah, for sure.
out there that don't quite fit our formula, but whatever. 3 points to start is fine. And then like I am having a hard time finding. And Be My Baby was obviously like British platinum. It was the problem is a lot of their highest selling singles are Christmas songs.
Ooh, we don't talk about Christmas songs,
Yes,
Nick.
I know we don't. I'm just their version of Sleigh Ride and Frosty the Snowman were 3
Yeah.
times platinum and gold respectively. So if I like any, basically what I'm trying to get at is any Ronettes like total album sales numbers that I could try to pull together here are going to be biased in terms of they're going to include that stuff, and that's obviously going to give them a few million, and it's hard for me to find a source
Listen,
that has a
I'm gonna be
reliable number
100%.
outside of that.
I'm going to be 100%
You know what I
real
mean?
with you, Nick. This is a group that released one studio album, even if we're giving them credit for more, and didn't write any of the songs. I'm fine not taking points away for sales because they're about to get 2.1s.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, very good.
For the sake of not spending
Yeah,
a half an hour between the
Sure.
two of us doing diligent research here
yeah,
for a group that's unfortunately going to score quite low anyway,
right. And
let's move.
basically for everything that you mentioned before, I'm going to give the Ronettes a 0.2 on their score.
Sure. And I'm going to give them, I'll do the inverse. I'll give them a 0.1,
Very good.
For similar reasons.
Yeah. All right, we get to instrumental talent. The vocal chops of these groups are the two things that they have going for them. I think this is the obvious strength here of everything.
I completely agree. I think I really don't see one as being better than the other.
No, I don't either.
I think maybe we just give them both the same score here,
I
which
am totally fine with that.
would equate, because we don't equate albums here.
Correct.
If I
This is
remember. This is the last one we
just what
don't equate.
You're good
Dude,
as
it's been
good as you are.
months.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't equate albums here. So I think we give them both the same score, and I think that score is good. Now they're not playing any instruments, so they're not going to get like, up in the high stratosphere. But I think we could talk about maybe a 6 for both of them here.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I was also going to say, and there are other vocal groups that we like, purer vocal groups like what are they called? The Mr. Sandman and Lollipop group. What are oh my god,
Oh
what are
my
they called?
god.
But they were doing
Yeah.
like more complex vocal. They were singing harder songs. They were doing harder things vocally. I don't know why I can't think of what they're called. But I basically am just saying
The
like
Chordettes.
the Chordettes. That's it. Like I think we probably gave them a higher score than a 6, and I think that's probably right.
I think so too. I mean, I think the difficulty, the caliber of the song
Yeah.
needs to be taken into account there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and then are we just doing point ones? Do you want to give a point 2 to songwriting for Please Mr. Postman, and then do point ones everywhere else?
So here's the thing. Here's my issue. Okay. When I do the awards at the end of the year, right?
Right.
I do the Razzies as well, our version of
I
the
know.
Razzies, the worst ofs. And if there's a 0.1, I skip it for songwriting
Right.
because I know that means they didn't write any of their songs.
Sure.
I refuse to give the Marvelettes the worst of for this season
Right.
because they were credited as writing their biggest hit and that's it.
Okay.
I feel like that's unfair to them and to the formula.
Sure.
So
Okay.
for that reason, I want to give them a 0.21
Oh, interesting.
because then I will look at that and I will remember. And also, when you're writing the score, Nick,
Mhm.
can you write "don't include" in worst for when I pull these later?
Okay.
Because I absolutely refuse to give them the worst songwriting of the season.
I'm putting it
at the
in.
end of
I've
the year.
highlighted it in red so that you
Perfect.
stop and think about what you're about to do.
Yeah, that is not. It is not at all. It's not at all fair to them
Sure.
because the only song they're credited as writing is literally their biggest hit, and not only
Yeah.
their biggest hit, the first Motown hit.
Yeah, that's
So
that's
like
pretty big.
it would be very unfair
Yeah.
to penalize them for that.
Right. Now that takes us perfectly into the ending here, which is X Factor. Is having the first #1 hit for Motown an X Factor point?
Absolutely, it is. It has to be.
How many? Is it 1 point?
I
Is it
think it's.
point
I think it's
something?
a.
Is it-
Let's see. Looking at their accolades as well, because I want to be perfectly fair here. I think a combination of being the first female group
Yeah.
to achieve success of any genre, and then also the first Motown act to have a #1 hit. I'm willing to give them 2 points here.
Wow. Okay.
It's heavy, but I think it fits. I really do.
Okay. You got it. Now, how many points are we looking at anything for the Ronettes in terms of whether it was the success or the influence in the studio of Be My Baby, or is it the story of Ronnie's kidnapping and
Yeah, I
torture at
mean,
the
here's the
hands
thing.
of
We have the precedent on this show of X Factor including infamy.
Sure.
And so I feel like it would be unfair to not include that. As much as I despise the idea of giving them bonus points for the trauma, because I don't agree with that,
Yeah.
I do think that they deserve X Factor points here for all of them, but as we mentioned, particularly Ronnie Spector,
Yeah.
for overcoming just a horrific man in a horrific situation. So I do want to give them points, but for that reason, for the overcoming of it more than for
Sure.
the fact that it happened.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's see. How many points is that?
I mean, they're your group. I will acquiesce to you on that. I think it's worth points. I mean, I think
Yeah.
not only that, but also like just when you talk about the Ronettes and like storming the scene, and I also think you can maybe give them here, like, we don't like to talk about it, but they are pretty famous for Christmas songs. Like maybe we give them
That's
a
true.
little bit of X Factor there too.
Okay.
As much as we like to pretend Christmas
Sure.
songs don't exist on our
Yeah.
podcast.
Right. I mean, is it crazy to also kind of keep them around the same place here and give them
Like
2
it too?
points?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Okay. All right. Well, then it didn't make a difference in the outcome, just to make sure that no one's too concerned. But I have final scores.
Okay.
and we have a winner.
Sure. I
Oh,
can't
is
push
there
any
nothing?
buttons.
Okay, there are no buttons. Okay, I'm
The
not winning.
buttons are moved, and the way that it's set up, they're not getting pushed right
All
now.
good. So winning this week with a score of 17.11 would be the Marvelettes, based on their amount of work that they put out. And not winning this week with a score of 15.
Close.
Womp womp. Yeah. Would be the Ronettes.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I've said it throughout the episode, but I just want to give it a little bit at the end, a little snippet. We both knew both of these artists were going to score low because
of the formula.
Because of the formula, lack of writing and lack of albums for the Ronettes.
Yeah.
But they were enjoyable to listen to. They're talented.
sure.
Like, we're going to run into, and we have run into, countless artists who have scored higher than this who we hated. But
Yep.
you
And
know,
we
part of
will again.
the way this formula works is like it takes quantity into account,
Mhm.
and it takes, you know, success into account as well for a little bit. You know, part of finding the greatest musical artist of all time is, you know, all three of those pillars. How good are they? How successful were they? And how volumetric is their work? We've
Yeah.
run into artists with hundreds of albums, not even a lie, who I didn't enjoy. We've
Yep.
run into artists with one album who I'm devastated didn't come out with more.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it's something to just talk about whenever it comes up, because every once in a while we run into an artist who subverts our formula, and
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
happens to be a whole episode of it.
Right. Yeah. And next week, we'll see if that trend continues when we take a closer look at the like ska craze of the 90s.
Yay. It'll be fine. It'll be good.
It'll be fun.
I enjoy more ska than I think I do a lot of times.
Yeah.
A lot of times I hear ska, I'm like, ska, and then I'll hear ska,
And then it's
I'm
like, oh, it's fun rock and roll music with horns.
Yeah. I really
Hell
feel
yeah,
like
man.
I feel like the marketing mind behind naming it ska really fucked up.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. So
I don't disagree.
yeah, I think that's it. I think now, most importantly, everybody here, gather around, grab your partner's hand, whoever's in the room with you. If you're in a waiting room, grab someone's hand, and have a great day. And also,
Fuck Jerry Lee Lewis.
fuck Jerry Lee Lewis, but also fuck Phil Spector.
Yeah.
Fuck Phil Spector.
What an asshole.
What a scumbag.
Whew. It takes a lot to like kidnap and torture somebody.
And yeah, well, he's not the first person who's kidnapped somebody
No, you're right.
on the podcast,
You're right.
which is crazy to talk about.
Oh, Rick James, what were you doing, man?
As much as I don't
Also
wanna
made
put Rick
really good
James in.
music.
Yeah. But here's the
What
difference
is it
between the
about
two
making
of
good
them.
music and being a fucking psychopath?
Well, here's the difference between the two of them. Rick James did it because he was like drugged up and like
Yeah.
going through psychosis. Phil Spector's a fucking
Phil
psychopath.
Spector just like lives for that shit.
He's a sociopath.
Yeah.
Dude, that's
Yeah.
sociopath. Like,
you can't lock someone in your house with a coffin that you tell them that you're going to put them in, surrounded
what
by
the
barbed wire and
fuck,
guard
dude?
dogs. You're like, that's not a normal.
that's what I'm saying. Like typically when you start giving your spiel, I will like kind of click, I'll click here and there about the
Yeah.
personal life and stuff because I want to like, read along. And I start reading it. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, and then I'm like, wait, did I miss Nick saying this stuff? There's no way.
No,
I heard him mention,
talked
I
about-
heard you mention the Phil Spector like, kidnapping thing. And I was like,
yeah.
oh, okay, cool. But, and then I was like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, I feel like there's more detail here that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Because holy shit, brother.
Yeah, dude, he was like a I forget what his rank was, like a Colonel Zaroff or whatever from The Most Dangerous Game.
Yeah.
Like that level of fucking psycho.
What a fucking absolute piece of garbage.
Yeah. That's brutal.
Yeah. I like truly, dude, rest in piss.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck that guy. All right. I'll let you go have dinner.
Yeah, man. I'm going.
Sorry for the delay again. I
It's
appreciate you
fine.
rolling with the punches on that.
It's fine. Honestly, I figured out how to make sound happen, so it worked out.
That was good.
All right.
Okay.
I will I'll see you
I'll
tomorrow.
see you tomorrow.
Hell yeah. All right. Okay, peeps, thanks for hanging out with us. As always, it was a blast. And hopefully you enjoyed it as we talked about some pretty formative girl groups of the 60s, the Ronettes and the Marvelettes. And also found out some just horrifically terrible stuff as always, because the music world is crazy. So with that being said, have a great day.